So once the king's men left, Rahab went to where she'd hidden the spies and helped them get out from under the flax. And what she does is she starts a negotiation with them. She declares that she believes in the power of God. And then she tells them, picking up in verse 12, "Now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you, me and my family. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families." Now, as we mentioned earlier, Rahab didn't live with her family. So at some point, there had been some sort of rift. And yet here in this moment, when she could just as easily be like, "I'm going to keep you alive, but you got to keep me alive," she goes out of her way to negotiate a covenant that includes her family. So the men reply, "We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land." Then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. "Escape to the hill country," she told them. "Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they have returned, you can go on your way." Strong women fight for the rescue of their families. What Rahab was doing was not like in desperation, begging for her life and the life of her family. She actually was negotiating every part of a kinship covenant, which was a normal way for people in relationship to make agreements at the time. And despite the fact that there was some sort of rift with her family, she advocated with these spies as they were negotiating for that family to be rescued along with her. We also have the honor of being people who advocate for the salvation of our family. And the challenge is that we don't necessarily get 2 spies to stand in front of us that we negotiate with and are like, "I'm going to save you and you save me." So what does it look like to do that today? Well, the first thing is we pray. Rahab was negotiating with the people of God, but we have the ability to approach God himself. Because of what Jesus has done, because of the Spirit that is in us, we can go straight to the throne and ask God to save our family. And that is something that we should be doing. If you're not doing this, if there's anything that you walk away from, pray for your family. But it's not just one-time prayer. I think sometimes, I won't say for everyone, but for me, I can think that I can pray one time and that's it. Like I'm going to ask God one time, and if he doesn't answer the way that I want, he must not have wanted that. But he calls us to prayer of commitment and perseverance. We see this going all the way back to Abraham. Abraham negotiated with God over Sodom and Gomorrah, these evil towns that God was thinking of destroying. And there's this famous back and forth where Abraham's like, "But what if there are 100 righteous people? Will you destroy it then?" And God says, "If there are 100 people, I won't destroy it." And then Abraham's like, "No mean to offend, but what if it's 50 people?" And they keep going. God is open to that kind of conversation. In fact, when Jesus came, when he was teaching his people how to pray, he taught in Luke 11 that we're supposed to be basically annoying neighbors. He says, "How many of you, if you get up in the middle of the night because you have an unexpected visitor and you don't have any bread to serve them, you go to your neighbor's house, you knock on the door, and they yell down, 'Leave me alone, I'm sleeping.'" Paraphrasing here, this is the Ashley translation. And they say, "Go back to bed. I'll help you in the morning. It's the middle of the night." He says, you keep knocking. Eventually, they're going to respond just to get rid of you. And that's when he says the famous passage, "Keep on asking and you will receive what you ask. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and to everyone who knocks the door will be opened." This is not a one and done kind of thing. This is a commitment, and it can sometimes be painful, and it can sometimes take waiting and not understanding why God's not doing what we want him to do, what he says he wants to do. But there's something in there that Jesus just built us for perseverant prayer, and we get to grow in our own faith as we commit to that. So we fight for our family in prayer that's persevering and committed, but it's also prayer of faith. We have to come to the throne believing that God is who he says he is, and God will do what he says he will do. And in 1 John 5, it says, "We are confident that he hears us when we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for." So we fight for our family in prayer that's committed and persevering in prayer of faith. But we don't just stop at the prayer part. The next part is, I think, harder. We have to talk to them. Now, I want to give you the caveat. There are times and situations of abuse where it is not good to reach out and talk to people, so that is not what I'm advocating for here. Sometimes you might pray for a person, but you're not going to reconcile with them. But a lot of times, there is opportunity for us to swallow our pride and build bridges that we just don't want to do. And at some point, Rahab had to do that. Because where we left off in the story, she had these spies she negotiated for the family, and they said that they would rescue them if they were in her home. And then we read in Joshua 6, this is when, if you know the story of Joshua, the Israelites end up walking around the city one time a day for 7 days. And then on the seventh day, they walk around 7 times. The last time, they blow their ram's horns, and then the city starts coming down. So when we pick up in Joshua 6, when the people heard the sounds of the ram's horns, these are the Israelites, they shouted as loud as they could, and suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into town and captured it. And then they're destroying everything, but meanwhile, Joshua tells the spies, keep your promise, go to the prostitute's house and bring her out along with all her family. The men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. So at some point, she told her family because they were in her home. They hadn't been there before, they didn't live there, but she at some point walked up to them and had to say, hey, you know that big army camp out there that everyone's afraid of? I believe that their God is the God of the universe, and I've negotiated for them to save us when they inevitably destroy our city. All you need to do is come hang out in my house until it happens. We don't know exactly when that will be. That was probably not an easy conversation because either she had to swallow her pride. If she was the one who rejected them and walked out and was all, I don't need you, she had to go back and give them this invitation. Or maybe she was forced out. And she had to put herself in the uncomfortable position of walking back to people who had said they didn't want her to be there anymore and tell them about this opportunity. We don't know the answer to that, but we do know that at some point she told them and they listened. We have the same opportunity to give this invitation to people in our lives. And a lot of times we don't think about it in the same way because we're not living in a city that's about to collapse. But the reality is, we know people who are living and dying without the saving knowledge of Jesus. And we get the opportunity to tell them, hey, I know this God. He's amazing. All you have to do is trust in him, and he'll save you. We get the opportunity to do that. Paul writes about it this way in 2 Corinthians. He says, so we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. For God made Christ, who never sinned, to be the offering for our sin so that we could be made right with God through Christ. That's the opportunity that we have. And yet I want to remind you, just like we've talked about in strong families and with strong men, our responsibility is the invitation. They're the ones who have to accept it. So you can't carry the responsibility for the way that people respond, but we do carry the responsibility for making the invitation known. And we even see that in the story of Rahab, where the men, when they were negotiating this, they basically said, we'll rescue you, all your family members, your father, mother, and brothers, and all your relatives, but they must be inside the house. Verse 19, if they go out into the street and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. So we see in the story of Rahab that she wasn't just someone who protected outsiders who came into her house with that strong Azer spirit. She was also someone who fought for the salvation of her family, both in negotiation with God's people and in inviting them into what he had.